yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and react to Luxorious. Like I said, he's really good. He has really good videos. But yeah, give him a like and follow over there. There'll be a link below to his video. But yeah, I have this was kind of me following up on this topic I had talked about on last week's stream. Do I think that it was a bad thing that they were taken down? Yes and no. I don't think that it's bad to necessarily play them. Like, if you're an adult, you're an adult, you know, do you. But also just the idea that credit card companies are controlling what games we play. Since when? I don't. What business do you have, credit card companies, on what I spend my money on? I went to work. I paid my hard-earned cash that I earned, and I'm gonna go spend that whenever I want. The issue is that not necessarily just for this. So I'm not saying that, oh, they did this and this is bad. No, they did this, and they could easily just do it with other things. They could easily do it. They could block you from playing Call of Duty. They could block you from this or that just because they feel that it's not good. So we feel it's not good. So you are not allowed to do it because we don't like it. You can't do it. In what fucking world? Excuse me? He's gonna explain it, but basically, internet's going through some censorship right now, and I don't really agree with it. In terms of, I don't agree with what this could mean in the future, and that's why I'm like, this is not good. And a lot of other content creators are basically of the same thought process as this is not good. This current situation is fine, but this could easily affect other things in the future, and it's just not okay. So again, we're gonna go ahead and react
on July
to this.
15th, 2025, a few days before I began writing this video, the largest...
Stop.
On July 15th, 2025, a few days before I began writing this video, the largest online gaming platform in the world, Steam, made an update to their rules and guidelines. Specifically, the category What You Shouldn't Publish on Steam, which added content that may violate the rules and standards set forth by Steam's payment processors and related card networks and banks, or internet network providers. In particular, certain kinds of adult-only content. This policy change might seem like a rather unimportant one at first, something that likely would have slipped under the radar if there weren't people who actively keep tabs on all of this. But it is important. After all, within a few days of the rule change going into effect, several hundred games were removed from Steam. And the truth is, this change is but one part of a long campaign trying to effectively censor the internet.
And he might not explain it. He probably will. I'm sure this is like a 40-minute video, but they did also go after itch.io, and thousands of games were taken off there as well, and or hidden. And I guess they're under a review process or whatever that means, I guess, from what I understand. And so some of them might come back, but I doubt it. It's what's going on right now is extremely stupid, and there needs to be some control back, because we're losing control, unfortunately, to the censorship.
A war that's been raging for decades now, with payment processors like Visa and MasterCard at the center. And one that very obviously threatens freedom of expression for everyone if left unchecked, especially for anything even remotely adult. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look at some more examples. On June 25th, 2025, Fansly, a major creator support site, announced that it would be banning adult material involving things like amateur wrestling, hypnosis, and anything resembling or role-playing as an animal, including not just furries, but VTubers and anyone who used the term puppy or cat girl. all due to pressure from payment processors. On May 20th, 2025, Japanese game and comics retailer Surigaya made an announcement stating, "We are faced with a situation where it is necessary to discuss payment processing methods for adult products with our providers. As a result, the site will be closed for the time being." On February 23rd, 2025, Japan's largest video sharing platform, Nico Nico, announced support for Visa and MasterCard was returning after a year-long hiatus, since they had removed over 50,000 videos with almost 1 billion collective views in order to comply with their policies. On November 26th, 2024, Manga Library Z, a comic shop specializing in out-of-print manga, shut down after 14 years of business due to Visa abruptly terminating service with them, even after working to comply with their policies. They would only be restored 5 months later after a crowdfunding campaign. May 21st, 2024, the creator platform Fantia states they will no longer be accepting Visa and MasterCard due to hosting adult material. April 3rd, 2024, Dojin distributor DL Site announces they will no longer be accepting Visa and MasterCard due to hosting adult material. July 20th, 2022, e-commerce platform DMM, with 45 million members, announces they will no longer be accepting MasterCard due to hosting adult material. March 15th, 2024, e-commerce platform Gumroad bans sexually explicit material in order to continue doing business with PayPal. November 15th, 2022, Pixiv, one of the largest art platforms in the world with over 100 million members, restricts their sexually explicit content in order to continue doing business with credit card companies. August 19th, 2021, the website OnlyFans, with its 220 million users, famously announces that they will be removing their sexually explicit material from the platform, a decision that was reversed a week later, but initially done in order to continue doing business with credit card companies. And on the 10th of December, 2020, in perhaps the most important case of them all, the website Pornhub deleted nearly 10 million videos, over 80% of its catalog, and required all of its users to be personally verified before Visa and MasterCard forcibly cut ties with them anyways. This Pornhub scandal in particular came after a New York Times article by Nicholas Kristof was written about the website, which accused them of being a hotbed for child abuse, revenge pornography, and sex trafficking. The article does showcase several prominent victims who had come forward with allegations, more than enough to take it seriously, but to give you an idea of the tone the article takes, here are some quotes. Pornhub notes that the Internet Watch Foundation, an English-based nonprofit that combats child sexual abuse imagery, reported only 118 instances of child sexual abuse imagery on its site over almost 3 years, seemingly a negligible figure. Perhaps it's because people on Pornhub are inured to the material and unlikely to report it. Too late we prosecute individuals like Jeffrey Epstein or R. Kelly. With Pornhub, we have Jeffrey Epstein times 1,000. But perhaps the most important line in that article is, "And call me a prude, but I don't see why search engines, banks, or credit card companies should bolster a company that monetizes sexual assaults on children or unconscious women. If PayPal can suspend cooperation with Pornhub, so can American Express, MasterCard, and Visa." Because indeed, PayPal had previously severed ties with the site, and shortly after this article was published, all the other companies would do the same. Notably, after Pornhub took down all of the unverified content from its platform, which is the exact thing that Kristof asked them to do in his article. Here's where things get interesting though. Later, in 2022, the company was sued by one of the victims Kristof featured, and Visa itself was indicted for facilitating their payments. You see, the main defense that companies like Pornhub have had against lawsuits over the years has been Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996. The whole act was focused on regulating indecent content online and was actually found to be unconstitutional. But Section 230, dubbed the Good Samaritan provision, was specifically severed and upheld. And it states that no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. In plain English, no company can be found liable for the actions of someone who posts something illegal on their website, which, even after being overwritten by things like the DMCA and having certain restrictions for federal crimes, is an especially powerful bit of law. Possibly one of the only reasons the modern internet could even exist without everyone being sued into oblivion. Something proven in 2008's Doe v. MySpace and 2009's Dart v. Craigslist, where MySpace and Craigslist were found immune from prosecution despite one website being used for a meeting with an underage girl and the other for ads connected to prostitution rings. However, one of the supporters of the initial unconstitutional Communications Decency Act was an organization by the name of Morality in Media. They've been operational since 1962 as an evangelical conservative advocacy group who have mainly pushed for stricter obscenity laws, abstinence-only sex education, and the complete abolishment of pornography, as well as several more controversial things. I mean, not only did they once publicly condemn Monty Python's Life of Brian as a deliberate violations of the rights of believing persons, they also later wrote a statement titled "Connecting the Dots: The Line Between Gay Marriage and Mass Murders."
Why are you gonna bring an old movie into this? Okay.
For those who knew about them, MIM was a very extreme fundamentalist group, and with the advent of the internet, they lost quite a bit of support due to their positions, with their own president once saying, "The war is over and we have lost." So in 2015, they renamed themselves the National Center on Sexual Exploitation and narrowed in on trying to shut down pornography under the banner of protecting women and children from sex trafficking, which they were much more successful at. Their campaigning actually directly led to the United States passing the Allow States and Victims to Fight Online Sex Trafficking Act, which was bundled with the equally bluntly named Stop Enabling Sex Traffickers Act as Sesta Fosta in 2018. This group of bills, alongside formally criminalizing assisting, facilitating, or supporting sex trafficking, also successfully amended Section 230 to exclude any cases related to it. Meaning, if your website or any of its users were accused of being in any way related to sex crimes, you no longer had any immunity from prosecution. Per Vox, in the immediate aftermath of Sesta's passage on March 21st, 2018, numerous websites took action to censor or ban parts of their platforms in response. Not because those parts of the sites actually were promoting ads for prostitutes, but because policing them against the outside possibility that they might was just too hard. 2 days after Sesta's passage by the Senate, Craigslist removed its entire personal section from its platform. In addition, Reddit banned multiple subreddits in response. Google also began reviewing and deleting content directly off the Drive accounts of several of its users. Similarly, in late March, Microsoft abruptly announced a drastic change to its policies and enforcement of those policies that effectively scoured its many services, including Skype and its cloud storage products, of any adult content. And by seemingly complete coincidence, after Sesta Fosta was passed, one Layla Micklethwait, director at Exodus Cry, another noted evangelical anti-sex work organization, whose founder once compared abortion to the Holocaust and called homosexuality an unspeakable offense to God, started the campaign Trafficking Hub, which asked for Pornhub to be shut down and held accountable for, you guessed it, sex crimes, something that got them over 2 million signatures on one of their petitions. Trafficking Hub was at the forefront of the movement to shut Pornhub down and is referenced alongside Micklethwait in Christoph's article, which also sneaks in the line, "We're already seeing that limiting Section 230 immunity leads to better self-policing," all before Christoph's call for credit card companies to cut ties, something that Exodus Cry and Morality in Media had been doing for years, having just written an open letter directed at Pornhub's payment processors a few months earlier. So after all this is where Serena Fleitas decided to sue MindGeek, Pornhub's parent company, for not taking proper measures to remove a video of her being abused while underage. As most lawsuits do, it throws the entire book at them, including charges of facilitating sex trafficking, which allowed them to bypass Section 230 protections. And it wrangled in every company affiliated with MindGeek in a massive RICO case, including Visa. Importantly, when Visa sent a motion to dismiss their involvement in the case, the judge denied it, citing the fact that Visa had previously cut and then restored ties with MindGeek since Christoph's article as primary evidence that they had conducted some internal investigation and must have been aware of any illegal activity, thus making them complicit. The allegations against MindGeek are obviously very serious. As Micklethwait posted on her Twitter, there are currently 27 lawsuits being made against them, most of them unresolved as far as I'm aware. Though the reason that I bring it up in this video is because this lawsuit is the single thing that has led to every other website I've talked about either shutting down or changing policy since 2020. It is the nexus point that you can trace all of the other payment processor related problems back to. Companies like Visa and MasterCard and PayPal have long been a prime target for advocacy groups to put pressure on. Of course they would be. Their dominance in the financial market means they have complete control over which companies live and die based solely on who they want to do business with. And they have no real obligation to do business with anyone or justify why they won't. During a Q&A at a press conference in Japan, someone asked Visa Japan's president, Sitan Kitney, why Visa was becoming unavailable in most adult stores. Kitney responded by saying that while Visa has a policy of allowing the use of its services for legal and legitimate payments as much as possible, sometimes we need to make payments unavailable to protect our brand. That's it, that's their only reasoning. Visa can choose to shut down your entire website and just say, yeah, we had to, and then not elaborate. It's completely arbitrary. But as Kitney just admitted here, being a corporation who cares about brand image and profit margins, they are susceptible to large campaigns and weaponized public sentiment. If you make enough noise at one of these companies to make them think that supporting whoever you're rallying against will hurt them more than cutting ties, they'll drop whoever you want them to in a heartbeat.
The problem is that they know that we don't have much of an option here, because who else are we going to use to process payments?
And even easier, if you can convince them that there will be legal consequences to not doing what you say, you can get them to bend the knee whenever you want. This is what Flytease v MindGeek did. It scared payment processors into distancing themselves from sex work and porn, because it proved that if a website Visa or MasterCard facilitates payments for is prosecuted, which they now can be even with Section 230, Visa and MasterCard can be found liable, meaning they now have to take up the responsibility of policing every company they work with, just to make sure they don't get in legal trouble. But because the Sesta Fosta Acts are so vague, these corporations are much more likely to just cut ties with anyone who might pose a future risk. Which, let's just be clear here, was the goal from the outset. Later reports would show that Sesta Fosta was a horrible disaster, and it was actually criticized for making it harder to prosecute actual sex trafficking in the US. According to a 2021 Government Accountability Office report, the acts were only used once during the first 3 years of their existence. The only major consequence of their passing that seemed to benefit anyone was that their removal of Section 230 protections made bullying websites into shutting down significantly easier. Congresswoman Ann Wagner, who co-authored FOSTA, even later used it herself to try and prosecute OnlyFans under accusations of them hosting unregulated and illegal material. During that famous week where OnlyFans was about to ban anything explicit, the company initially stated that it was due to pressure from their bank, JP Morgan, and that credit card companies hadn't been involved. However, later, a whistleblower from the US Treasury's Financial Crimes Unit revealed that a private complaint had been filed with Visa and MasterCard, which tried to pressure them into cutting ties over suspicion of sex trafficking. All while MasterCard was publicly campaigned into tightening their adult content policies by Exodus Cry. For reference, OnlyFans was reportedly linked to 80 cases of child sexual abuse material in 2021 by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Facebook was linked to over 20 million. But none of that matters, does it? Because the target here is porn. Whether you agree that these companies have done something wrong or not, the pressure against them is clearly a coordinated attack by anti-sex work organizations on a crusade against the adult industry. Their goal is not for these websites to become safe and free from criminal activity. Their goal is for them to cease to exist. Mickelwait's initial op-ed that started her trafficking hub movement was literally titled "Time to Shut Pornhub Down." NCOSE has openly called to abolish pornography, the chairman of the board once describing it as a tool of Satan. To quote another Vice article, sex trafficking is a real and tragic issue, but anti-trafficking groups frequently equate the entire adult industry, including pornography, with exploitation, and paint sex workers as victims in need of rescue. No reasonable human is pro-trafficking, but anti-trafficking groups use the issue to advance legislation and policies and real-world stigma against sex workers to further their cause. Frequently, these anti-sex trafficking groups want to end the entire adult industry altogether. When people freak out over Steam changing a single policy on its website, this is why. there is now nothing stopping Visa and MasterCard and PayPal from banning any number of games for any number of reasons, because what they ban is pretty much entirely determined by who makes the most noise at them, and who can hang the biggest threat of legal consequences over their heads. In Steam's case in particular, they've been targeted by these anti-porn activists in the past, over games like Honey Pop and certain visual novels, but the group that has taken responsibility for the recent policy change goes by the name Collective Shout, short for Collective Shout for a World Free of Sexploitation, an Australian organization ran by Melinda Tankard-Rice, which according to their Twitter is a grassroots campaigning movement against the hashtag objectification of women and hashtag sexualization of girls in hashtag media, hashtag advertising, and popular culture. They've been active for quite a while, shotgunning campaigns against various adult-related industries and artists. The list of Shout and Rice's previous campaigns include trying to ban Detroit Become Human and Grand Theft Auto V from sale in Australia due to encouraging abuse against women and children, boycotting the 50 Shades of Grey movie, and lobbying to get Tyler the Creator, Snoop Dogg, and Eminem's visas revoked because of their misogynistic lyrics. Most of these never really got that far, for obvious reasons, but over the years they have gotten wins, taking down indie games from itch.io, banning certain visual novels from sale, claiming they're the reason Andrew Tate's podcast was removed from Spotify. And after gaining momentum, they finally submitted an open letter to Steam's payment processors demanding that they drop the platform for hosting illegal sexual abuse material, which got Steam to change their policies. It also got itch.io, a marketplace for independent games and artists that has previously been vocal for their support of adult content, to put out a statement saying, "We have de-indexed all adult, not safe for work content from our browse and search pages." The organization Collective Shout launched a campaign against Steam and itch.io, directing concerns to our payment processors about the nature of certain content found on both platforms. "We are currently conducting a comprehensive audit of content to ensure we can meet the requirements of our payment processors. Pages will remain de-indexed as we complete our review. Part of this review will see some pages being permanently removed from itch.io." This is a page straight out of Trafficking Hub's playbook, and no surprise, Collective Shout follows Layla Micklethwait, and was on the list of groups who pressured Visa and MasterCard to drop Pornhub back in 2020. They hopped on the bandwagon of criticizing OnlyFans in 2021. Exodus Cry and NCOSC are both on the list of signatures for their open letter to Steam. None of these groups really hide the fact that they're all connected to one another. Collective Shout seems to advertise themselves as more of a progressive movement than the others, though, as usual, their actual stance is a little bit more extreme than that. They follow tons of right-wing accounts and anti-LGBT activists on Twitter. Their founder is a self-described pro-lifer who has been called a religious conservative in feminist clothing, and their official account just recently retweeted anti-trans hate speech. They've even relied on the classic tactic of calling opposition to their movement porn-sick, brain-rotted pedo-gamer fetishists. Though, as I'll just quote from the Vice article about them, without further proof from Collective Shout on the supposed games in question, it's hard to say whether child or childlike characters existed in any of the games targeted by the organization. It's certainly plausible that Collective Shout is disingenuously describing adult anime characters in adult video games as underage. That Vice article, as well as a few others exposing the group's more radical positions and connections, were written by one Anna Valens. And while writing this video, actually more like a couple hours before I started recording, Vice's parent company, Savage Ventures, cut ties with Valens and took down all of their articles, for supposedly controversial subject matter, not journalistic complaints. This is part of the reason why I don't want to downplay any of these groups too much, even if a lot of their campaigns have been failures and their founders act very silly online, because their positioning and marketing as advocacy groups does give them a lot of power and a lot of protection from criticism. As long as they continue to be shielded from negative press, it doesn't matter how many of their attempts are failures, because they can just keep campaigning until something finally gives. And the second they win any ground, they're immediately going to expand and try to take down something bigger. Their campaign right now is asking Elon Musk to ban porn on Twitter. They are definitely going to protest the release of GTA 6 when it comes out, and they probably won't succeed, but they will keep up pressure and keep trying to build momentum until they have a legitimate chance. In another part of the world though, Japan has actually recently been fighting a whole other battle. One of the most infamous adult content scandals that the country and perhaps the world ever saw was the 2006 game Replay, an eroge game made by Illusionsoft that featured the protagonist going around and sexually assaulting women, among other somehow even worse things. The game, even though Illusionsoft didn't distribute it overseas, found its way to Amazon and other countries, where it immediately came under massive scrutiny and was banned pretty much everywhere, including in its home country of Japan after protesters reached the ear of the Prime Minister, and in Australia, where it was one of the first major wins by the founder of Collective Shout. This cemented Japan as the sort of front lines in this battle surrounding pornography and freedom of expression, since after 2006, many advocacy groups began putting on more and more pressure against anything deemed obscene when it came to anime, manga, and video games, with the definition of obscene naturally becoming more and more broad as they kept gaining ground.
The worst anime my office discovered is Ramanga Sensei. The plot is beyond what any person would consider as normal or appropriate. Goblin Slayer. Which I have to say in my office we showed to a number of people today, and they were absolutely horrified. Further research by my staff uncovered
Goblin Slayer's not that bad. It's good anime. Honestly, they'll probably the part that they're talking about literally is just like, it's not the whole anime, it's literally just like the first episode. Come on.
Covered another series called No Game, No Life. The series also heavily features incest themes, and many scenes are so disturbing, I just can't describe them. In another scene, high school girls are at a swimming pool where one of the girls indecently assaults another character by repeatedly squeezing her breasts and bullies her because of her physicality. And as I've said, experts say that pedophiles are using this material to groom children. Have a look at this. This is normal. It's certainly not normal.
Months before Collective Shout's open letter to Steam, which suspiciously included the Japan Credit Bureau on the list of companies, payment processors and banks had already been making moves to limit their services. According to politician Taro Yamada, when Japanese individuals or companies earn revenue on Steam, if the game in question is adult-oriented, Japanese banks refuse the transfer from overseas, preventing the receipt of revenue. To begin with, those handling adult-oriented games are unable to open bank accounts in Japan. Yamada has since traveled all the way to Visa's US headquarters to protest against their denial of service, and has been one of the largest advocates talking about it in recent history, though they've also reported on various other opponents to adult media, including a UN committee statement that Japanese pornography, video games, manga, and other animated products may promote violence based on gender or sexual orientation against women and girls, which then recommended the government legally restrict all of these products. And this is by no means a sentiment that solely comes from the West, despite what some people online might want to believe. Within Japan, the right-wing ultranationalist party Sanseito, who have previously said that the 2020 pandemic was staged and that Japan shouldn't sell out to Jewish capital, made it their official policy that they will delegate authority to the Agency for Cultural Affairs to ensure the wholesome development of manga, anime, and games as culture. Taro Yamada did recently win re-election, but Sanseito has also been gaining ground recently. So while the regulation of anime and manga is by no means a new battle, it has been kicked into high gear since payment processors began shutting down and restricting websites. Even Yoko Taro, the creator of Nier Automata himself, tweeted out, "Publishing and similar fields have always faced regulations that go beyond the law. But the fact that a payment processor, which is involved in the entire infrastructure of content distribution, can do such things at its own discretion seems to me to be dangerous on a whole new level. It implies that by controlling payment processing companies, you can even censor another country's free speech. I feel like it's not just a matter of censoring adult content or jeopardizing freedom of expression, but rather a security hole that endangers democracy itself." Now, I really couldn't put it any better, though this series of tweets might be just a bit less cool than the one by former Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, who quote tweeted a post by Taro Yamada with the caption, "Credit card issue, I'll handle it." So, throughout this whole thing, you might have been wondering, how is any of this legal? How can groups like these keep threatening payment processors without repercussions? And the answer to that is, it's complicated. Mostly because free speech is a very powerful thing, and simply filing an open letter to drop companies who we are implying are doing sex crimes is hard to prove as an actionable threat. at least when it involves private citizens. We actually have a very relevant and honestly hilarious legal case for when a government official is involved, as happened in 2015's Dart v. Backpage. I'll just read out the transcript and let it speak for itself. The sheriff of Cook County, Tom Dart, has embarked on a campaign intended to crush Backpage's adult section. Crush Backpage period, it seems, by demanding that firms such as Visa and MasterCard prohibit the use of their credit cards to purchase any ads on Backpage, since the ads might be for illegal sex-related products or services such as prostitution. It may seem odd, though it certainly does not exonerate Sheriff Dart, that he should be going after the credit card companies rather than after Backpage itself. If Backpage is violating the law by accepting classified ads for adult services, which may include illegal services such as prostitution, you'd think the sheriff would sue Backpage. But no, he tried that against Craigslist, a classifieds ad website that had an adult section similar to Backpage's, and he failed. District Judge Grady, in a thorough opinion, threw out the sheriff's case. The suit against Craigslist having failed, the sheriff decided to proceed against Backpage not by litigation, but instead by suffocation, depriving the company of ad revenues by scaring off its payment service providers. The analogy is to killing a person by cutting off his oxygen supply rather than by shooting him. It's true that Visa filed an affidavit stating that at no point did Visa perceive Sheriff Dart to be threatening Visa, but what would one expect an executive of Visa to say? I am afraid of the guy? He is in effect calling me an accomplice of a criminal organization, and I'm afraid he might pull strings to get me investigated and even prosecuted by any one of several federal or state agencies? As a citizen or father or in any other private capacity, Sheriff Dart can denounce Backpage to his heart's content. He is in good company. Many people are disturbed or revolted by the kind of sex ads found on Backpage's website. In his public capacity as a sheriff of a major county, Sheriff Dart is not permitted to issue and publicize dire threats against credit card companies that process payments made through Backpage's website, including threats of prosecution in an effort to throttle Backpage. Unwittingly, the judge who ruled in Dart's favor in this case previously was suggesting a formula for permitting unauthorized, unregulated, foolproof, lawless government coercion. The formula consists of coupling threats with denunciations of the activity that the official wants stamped out. For the target of the denunciation will be reluctant to acknowledge that he is submitting to threats, but will instead ascribe his abandonment of the activity to his having discovered that it offends his moral principles. The judge was giving official coercion a free pass because it came clothed in what the absence of any threatening language would have been a permissible attempt at mere persuasion. I highly recommend reading that entire transcript, by the way, because the rest of it is just as amazing. Judge Posner's points here are all incredibly prescient. Visa and MasterCard will never say why they made any specific decisions, as they have no obligation to, and they certainly won't point any fingers at the people or officials pressuring them to make them. So they will always shoulder all the blame because they're ultimately the tool by which the damage is done. I think that the tool itself here, having caused the damage, is what needs the most immediate correction, but we also need to be careful not to forget who's wielding them. Who is, in the absence of any threatening language, merely attempting to persuade these companies to do whatever they want. They shouldn't also get away with using them as scapegoats. To finish this off,
yeah, Asmund did say in his video covering this kind of thing was that you can't necessarily go after the Karens, because like you get rid of them, there's just gonna be another group that comes around eventually at some point. It's the payment processing companies. That's who needs some sort of regulation, you know what I mean?
I focused a lot on Pornhub and advocacy groups as a catalyst that led to the changes we're still dealing with here. But I shouldn't have to remind you, financial fuckery directed at the adult industry has been going on long before 2020. On May 24th, 2014, from The Washington Post. The Justice Department's Operation Choke Point initiative has been shrouded in secrecy, but now it is starting to come to light. I first heard about the program in January through this article, and since then it has been difficult to discover details about it. It is so named because through strangling the providers of financial services to the targeted industries, the government can choke off the oxygen, money, needed for these industries to survive. The general outline is the DOJ and bank regulators are putting the screws to banks and other third-party payment processors to refuse banking services to companies and industries that are deemed to pose a reputation risk to the bank. Most controversially, the list of dubious industries is populated by enterprises that are entirely, or at least generally, legal. For example, there are also reports that porn stars have had their bank accounts terminated for moral reasons related to the reputation risk of banking individuals in the porn industry. On December 2nd, 2015, an article for Engadget was posted titled PayPal, Square, and Big Banking's War on the Sex Industry. In it, they describe how despite the FDIC dropping sex work from its list of targets due to backlash, several companies and individuals had still been publicly denied service by credit card providers, banks, and various payment processors over the years. Many famous adult stars had their accounts with PayPal and Chase closed entirely, some even having the funds seized right out from under them. And one star, by the name of Eden Alexander, had a crowdfunding campaign they had started for life-saving medical treatment shut down by the platform, simply because they were an adult performer. In 2023, the Free Speech Coalition put out a report titled Financial Discrimination and the Adult Industry, where they said that 63% of those in the industry had lost access to a bank or financial service because of it. 46% of those surveyed having lost access to one just that year. 2 in 3 adult performers also said they had faced discrimination when applying for housing and employment. And as someone who is a big supporter of adult artists and creators online, I have seen so many cases of them being shut down or fucked over by not just the companies holding all of their money, but the platforms that they make it on. It would not surprise me at all if the number of adult creators who had lost access to online platforms like Patreon was on par with or higher than 63%. But, of course, the main reason given to almost every denial of service related to sex work or pornography has always been that it's too risky. That's the number one line you'll hear parroted by almost every company I've covered. The risks mentioned are typically more chargebacks, contested payments, and fraud, but there's never anything given to back this up. It's just a common talking point that they can repeat and have repeated for decades. Even though the US porn industry makes more money than Hollywood and globally has been estimated as high as $97 billion, none of that matters when they can just claim risk and drop you. PayPal has restricted certain sexually oriented materials or services since 2005. Updating their policy after cutting ties with Pornhub in 2019 to no longer allow sexually oriented digital goods or content delivered through a digital medium. So, as that Engadget article goes on to say, redlining, outlawed in 1968, is the practice of refusing to do business with so-called high-risk applicants from high-risk neighborhoods who are otherwise completely qualified. Since the 1930s, actual maps with red lines were used by banks to demarcate Black and Hispanic neighborhoods, and redlining became a verb. To redline a community was to cut it off from equal financial access, rights, and opportunities. Being redlined was a death sentence for getting out of poverty. In 2014, Chase began a targeted campaign of account evictions in a neighborhood called Porn. One of the victims, performer Tegan Presley, told press that Chase's stated reason was because it considered her line of work to be in a high-risk category. There are no literal lines in a map here, but it appears there are virtual ones around an entire section of the internet. So, what now? We can clearly see where the problem lies, which I think is the most important part. Advocacy groups have free rein to pressure websites and the companies that facilitate them under the guise of things like sex trafficking, which they now have zero legal protection against. Payment processors can also be held accountable in these lawsuits, meaning they're more likely to drop anyone they think is a risk. And because payment processors have absolute power to choose who they do business with, while having a monopoly on online payments, your choices are either to comply with them or die. The most immediately helpful solution that would make the most difference would then have to be twofold. You'd have to rebuff protections for Section 230 and grant websites immunity again from lawsuits against the actions of their users. And you'd also have to place restrictions on the ability for financial institutions, even the private ones, to deny service on the basis of being associated with adult content, and then somehow actually enforce that. Both of these are seriously major asks, and anything short probably wouldn't be enough. But it isn't impossible. Getting rid of Sesta Fosta would be a major step. Given that they seemingly don't do anything remotely helpful, all it would take is someone brave enough to oppose the bills branded as stopping sex trafficking. And we've already seen politicians like Taro Yamada and Fumio Kishida try and take on Visa and MasterCard in Japan. So if they can get enough support, and maybe some sort of similar movement can start in the US, then I can imagine a world where discrimination against adult content is at least curbed. I should note that people have been hyping up the Fair Access to Banking Act, which was proposed on February 5th, 2025, and would put into law that no payment card network may directly or through any agent, processor, or licensed member of the network prohibit or inhibit the ability of any person who is in compliance with the law to obtain access to services or products of the payment card network because of political or reputational risk considerations. However, this bill specifically cites its target as persons involved in politically unpopular businesses and has been solely proposed and supported by Republican senators to prevent banks from turning down things like coal plants, firearm businesses, and oil and gas drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So not only does it not mention the adult industry at all, it has a few other shady elements to it. I think from an individual perspective though, just knowing that things like this are happening is a very helpful first step, especially knowing the groups behind it, like Exodus Cry and Collective Shout and NCOSC, aka Morality and Media, because all of them very deliberately want to brand themselves as protectors of the innocent and the organizations against sex crimes. That's what drives support to their cause. It's what makes people think they're a reasonable, positive group that you should agree with. It's what lets them paint their opposition as porn-sick, brain-rotted pedo gamer fetishists. The main weapon that groups like these wield is their voice, their ability to be loud and threatening and obnoxious, to pressure corporations into doing what they want, and then to keep the backlash on the corporations while they move on to their next target. In the absence of being able to legally put a stop to what they're doing, the best counter we have is to be even louder and more vocal about these issues. Let people know just what kinds of groups they're supporting here. Let these companies know that there are many people who do not want this censorship to continue. In the description of this video, you'll find a link to an ACLU petition I found advocating for MasterCard to change their adult content policies, the ones they adopted after pressure from Exodus back in 2022. And if anyone finds any more like it, send them my way and I'll add them down below too. I'd love for there to be some sort of cohesive Stop Killing Games-esque movement that could be formed to tackle this whole thing, but when it comes to regulating companies and repealing laws, I don't think it's that simple. It's certainly out of my wheelhouse anyways. I mean, what do I know? I'm just a single person. This whole video is just me trying
I wouldn't know either.
to spread awareness, share information and sentiments that have existed and been posted online for years, but haven't gotten that much attention. All of these serious reveals and accusations towards these groups have come from very legitimate sources that I've done my best to collect together, and everything else is just my personal opinion. As I've made clear before, I would love to live in a world where making sexual or explicit art is not needlessly shamed and persecuted. I would love for there to be protections in place for not only sex workers, but the companies and websites that host and support them. I would love for people to stop thinking of anything adult as obscene and anyone in the adult industry as a liability or a victim. But until the day where that happens, it's important that we fight to get there. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Great video. Great video. Definitely go ahead and give him a like and follow. Yeah, that was a really good in-depth video and even history into where all this is coming from currently. A lot of information I didn't even know, so that's good. Yeah, this is just, it's not good. There needs to be regulation, but not in terms of just get rid of all of it. That's not okay. I'm sorry. There needs to be another solution here. So, yeah, go ahead and give that a like, and also, again, if you're not following me, go ahead and hit the follow button, like this video if you like it, comment below, let me know what you think, what your opinions are of this. If I'm gonna look into that petition, and there might be a link to as well. I'm not sure yet. There'll be a post future me, but thank you for watching, guys.